room read the book other than Dad? Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, so I'll tell you just a little bit. It's set in the years leading up to the riots in Sri Lanka in 1983. It's the 5 years leading up to the riots. And it's set down one road, and it's told from the voices of the children who live down this road. The narrator is the road itself, and that is sort of observing what is going on. Is this okay? And I'm going to read you, there's a prologue that gives you some of the bigger historical background, but I'm going to read a little bit from the first chapter of the book. And you don't have to, you'll hear a lot of names, but you don't have to pay any attention to them, because I just want you to listen for the feel of the story, because you'll eventually read the book and you can pay attention to the names then. The only other thing you need to know is that I write long sentences, so you have to kind of work with me a little bit here. But the whole book is not full of long sentences, just some of them. Yeah, that's it. The listeners. God was not responsible for what came to pass. People said it was karma, punishment in this life for past sins, fate. People said that no beauty was permitted in the world without some accompanying darkness to balance it out, and surely these children were beautiful. But what people said was unimportant. What befell them befell us all. The Herath's children were different from all the others who had come and stayed for a while on Salman Lane. It was not simply the neatness of their clothes, washed, sun-dried, and ironed for them by the live-in servant, or their clean fingernails, or the middle parting on their heads for the girls, on the side for the boys, or their broad foreheads and wise eyes, or even the fact that they didn't smile very often, some inner disquiet keeping their features still. It wasn't their music-making or their devout following of deities of all faiths, who came and went through their house with the predictability of monsoon rains. It was the way they stood together even when they were apart. There was never a single Herath child in a conversation, there were 4. Every word uttered, every challenge made, every secret kept together. These things, discovered as the months wore on, came to bear upon a day of loss, a day crystallized into a moment that the whole neighborhood, yes, even those who had encouraged such a day, would have done anything to take back, a day that defined and sundered all of their lives. But let us return to the beginning, to the year when, in a pillared parliamentary building that had been constructed overlooking a wind-nudged blue ocean, a measure was passed under the title, the Prevention of Terrorism Act. It was an act that built upon a previous one, an act declaring a state of emergency, the kind of declaration that made adults skittish, elevated small quarrels into full-blown hatreds, and scuttled the best of intentions. For how could goodwill exist under such preparedness for chaos, such expectations of anarchy? The only goodwill to be had was among children unaware of such declarations, children like the ones on Salman Lane, children moving into a new home that brought with it the possibility of new friends. Let us return then to the first days of that year, the days that filled so many people with hope for what the new family would bring to them. Let us pay attention to their words, to the way they enter this house, alone and together, close or from a distance, intent and wish inseparable. Let us return to observe the very first day that foretold all the days that followed. On the day that the Heraths moved into the last empty house on Salman Lane, the one located exactly at the center where the broad road angled slightly to continue uphill, the Herath children happened to be learning hymns and hallelujahs from their mother. The children's mother, Mrs. Herath, herself a staunch Buddhist, was given to taking on other faiths based solely on the musicality of their songs, faiths of which she partook like others tasted of side dishes, little plates piled high with crispy fish cutlets and vegetable patties. Right now she was going through a Jesus phase, having not yet discovered the chants of the modern Hindu sage Satya Sai Baba. On the very first afternoon, even before she tended to her anthuriums and pride of Japans and other potted plants that had been brought over in an old borrowed citron, she sat at their piano and played while her sons and daughters, two of each, belted out, "What a friend we have in Jesus," in perfect harmony. In the house across the street, an old man, Mr. Niles, long confined to spending his days reclining in his armchair in languorous apathy, stirred. With some degree of exertion, he pulled himself up to a sitting position and listened. Although he was himself raised in the Catholic tradition, it was not the familiar hymns that moved him, but the voices. He tilted his face this way and that, trying to untangle them one from the other. He picked out 4 distinct voices, one imbued with refinement, the word endings clear and elegant, the notes held to beat, another sensitive and rich, the melody heroic, and a third that did not seem to care for timing and so was lifted with a too soon, too late delight that was refreshing. The last, a boy's voice, he could not place. It seemed both dogged and resigned, earnest as though he wanted to please, yet not entirely committed to this particular form of pleasing. It wavered between ardent expression and the mere articulation of melancholy words set to music. Mr. Niles listened more intently to that voice, which spoke of a spirit that required soothing, curious as to what could trouble a boy so young. Unseen by anybody, not even his wife and daughter, each busy with her own weekend preoccupations, he listened through that afternoon, piecing together the unuttered feelings that lay beneath those angelic voices, conjuring up an image of each child, and imagining a life for them in the house into which they had moved. Sana, the bowling son, 14 years of age, had spent the day leaning against his uncle's gate, watching the activity across the street. He had arrived that morning dressed in his Sunday church-going clothes, though if someone had pointed out that he was trying to present himself at his best, he would have denied it. Sana had come to assess potential, which in his mind meant one of 2 things: the ability to bully others or being susceptible to bullying. He had watched the children all day, his face arranged in an expression between scorn and disinterest, trying to gauge to which category they belonged. So far, he had not been able to tell, and not even his uncle Raju, who peered over the gate with him, had a definite opinion. "Can't tell if they're good or not till we talk to them," his uncle said at last, hitching up his loose trousers as he went inside. Sana continued to watch. The boys were not muscular, they were lanky and long-fingered, their mouths full and at ease, which augured well for classifying them as victims. Yet there had been a steadfastness to their gaze when they had first seen him that confused Sana. They had nodded, their arms full of bags and boxes filled with books, but had not smiled, which he took to mean that they too were able to judge character and had him pegged as a neighbor, but not one they were likely to befriend. He spat into the ground. They were adversaries, those boys, though the source of their strength was not one that he could identify. The girls too had resisted the title of victim that he yearned to pin on them, they with their matching dresses and their laughter. They resisted it by not noticing him at all, though how was that possible? He was tall, good-looking and strong, and standing right across the street from them. He had been standing there for hours. How could they not have noticed? "Fucking snobs," he said to his uncle, who had come back out to ask him if he wanted some tea. "Think they're too good for us. Probably only want to talk to the silver boys. Probably just like them. We'll see them. We'll see about that. We'll see how they manage to live here without talking to us bowlings. Think they can just talk to themselves?" "Maybe they're busy today, moving and all," Raju told his nephew. To be proximate to Sana when he was not happy was not something that Raju ever enjoyed. In the end, he always wound up being clobbered for nothing he had said or done. "Youngest looks sweet," he added, watching the little girl who had abandoned her siblings and was skipping in the veranda, the rope smacking rhythmically both on the floor and on the ceiling above her. After a while, she called out to someone they could not see, dropped the rope, and ran inside. Raju craned his neck toward the front doors of the house through which the children had disappeared one by one. From inside came the strains of a piano being played. Didn't even smile once, Sana muttered. Raju lowered his head, anticipating trouble. He tried to think of something soothing to say, knowing as he had known on every other such occasion that words would fail him. Sana had accumulated a list of unhappy accomplishments, bullying his twin sisters, riding the buses without paying his fare, cutting the clotheslines in his neighbors' backyards and rejoicing in the way everything clean turned instantly muddy, things he did without a second thought. But what he enjoyed the most was tormenting his uncle. In truth, Raju, who hid the ruby muscles of a bodybuilder underneath layers of flesh, could have felled Sana to the ground with a single swipe, but he lacked two things. He lacked what Sana had, the idea that he deserved to be top dog, and though this would change to Raju's dismay and shame, he lacked, for now, a good enough reason to fight Sana. Don't go and try to suck up, Sana said, as Raju hung his head and listened. Sana smacked him on the side of his head. You're fucking retarded anyway. They won't want to talk to you, and I don't want to see you running after them. You hear me? He shoved his uncle with a fist and Raju started back. You hear me? If I catch you. No, what to talk, I won't talk. Too much for me to be doing, Raju said, unbuttoning the top of his shirt and trying to get some air down the front of his body. I have too much to do. Too much to do, Sana scoffed. You got nothing to do, you fool. 35 years old and still living with mommy, don't even have a job. It was at that moment that the Herath household erupted into what a friend we have in Jesus, which proved too much for Sana, who shoved Raju once more, spat again for good measure, and strode down the road, his hands in his pocket as he contemplated his next move. He stumbled over a stone as he went, turned back to make sure that nobody had seen, then kicked the stone into the bushes, wincing as a sharp edge caught the end of his stove. Raju listened absent-mindedly to the music from the house across the street as he watched Sana walk away. The voices and the piano were equally balanced, and the singing was different from anything he had heard before. His immediate neighbors, the Niles family, owned a piano, and their daughter Kala Niles was a piano teacher, but there had never been any singing next door, just the strains of scales in quick tempo and difficult pieces of music. He wondered if the children took lessons, and if they did not, whether they would go to Kala Niles to learn. He hoped that if they did, they would not simply end up playing the same pieces over, but would continue to sing as they were doing now. He turned his face toward the Niles' house, wondering if they too were listening to the new children. He shaded his eyes and took stock of Kala Niles' rose bushes, which had just begun to show over the top of the wall that separated the two houses. At this time of day, the flowers scented the afternoon air. He tipped his head back and flared his nostrils, inhaling deeply as he listened a while longer to the voices from across the street. He felt his spirits lift. Whatever Sana had to say about these new people, they could hardly be ignored when they sang so beautifully.